Welcome to Kahoma Community College's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ouida McAfee, Director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And today we have with us Dr. Morris Thomas. Welcome, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you so much, Dr. McAfee, for having me here. Very happy to be here.
Great. We're going to be talking about your framework. So before we jump into the framework, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So very happy to be here with you all and with Dr. McAfee in particular. So first, I want to tell you just a little bit about how I know Dr. McAfee. You all are very fortunate to have Dr. McAfee at, pronounce the name of this community college again. I don't want to mess it up.
Sure. Kahoma Community College.
Kahoma. Okay. Very simple. I just wanted to make sure I'm looking at it like turned around in the frame here. But you all are very, very, very fortunate to have Dr. McAfee at Kahoma Community College. I actually call her Dr. O. Actually, she is actually currently my coach, my cluster coach in the HBCU Faculty Development Network that's being provided by Propel Center. So I'm going through that particular fellowship right now and have her to help guide myself and a few of us through that. So that's one thing about myself is that I am a person who really believes in continuous learning and growing. And again, it's been a pleasure to meet Dr. McAfee in that space and have her help as our guide. At my home institution, I'm at Howard University, and I serve in a number of capacities at Howard University. I am an associate professor of educational policy and leadership studies in the School of Education. I'm also an adjunct lecturer in the Department of Information Systems and Supply Chain Management in the School of Business. Then administratively, I'm an assistant provost for digital online learning and the director of our Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, which we call CETL at Howard University. And so I'm very, very happy to be here. And I'm also the creator of the Enhanced Learning Model, which is one learning framework, and then the one we're going to talk about today, which is the whole experience framework. So I'm very excited to be here. And that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the gracious compliments. It's a pleasure to know you and Howard University, HU.
You know.
Should be very happy to have you, and I know they are. So let's jump in. You had mentioned your framework, and tell us the name of it again.
Sure, it is the whole experience framework. For short, the WEF. I usually just say the whole experience framework. And I think you're going to have me talk a little bit about it, but it is an acronym. WHOLE is an acronym that stands for 5 components that I believe I'm going to explain a little bit more, but that is the name of the framework.
Okay, well, let's start there. Tell us about the 5 components, please.
Sure. So the framework is composed of 5 components, as I just mentioned. So each of them being an acronym, each letter in the word whole stands for a particular component. So the W stands for welcoming, the H is holistic, the O stands for open, the L stands for liberating, and the E empowering. And the purpose of the framework is when you work in learning science, like Dr. McAfee and I, we've done a lot of different study on many different things. And I'll just run through a few of them so you can understand why your framework is needed. So we have the big 4 kind of learning theories, such as constructivism, connectivism, cognitivism, and behaviorism. Then you have things like universal design for learning. Then you have things such as Hilaire's 3 dimensions of learning. Then you have things as 501 of the Section 504 and 508 of the Rehabilitation Act and the American Disability Act. You have all of these different things you have to be contend with. Then you have the GOGI, so pedagogy, andragogy, hudagogy, cybergogy, and the list goes on. And so if your discipline isn't in the learning science or you weren't trained classically as a teacher or educator, then you have a subject matter expertise in many of the disciplines that your institution may offer, but not necessarily the framework or the models to then transfer or build these learning environments and engaging experience for learners. So Ergo, a model like the whole experience, which gleans from these many different proven evidence-based models and provides you with more of a simplistic, hopefully simplistic and comprehensive combined model that leans into all of these learning sciences.
Okay, sounds good. So, I know when we were talking previously, you mentioned specifically universal design. So, give us an example of how the model is applied using universal design.
Sure. So I mentioned the five components. And so one thing, these different components work together. It is not hierarchical. So you can lean into being welcoming and holistic and open and liberating and empowering all at the same time. So the universal design for learning, let me just explain a little bit about what that is. So it has three principles.
Okay.
The three principles are multiple means of representation or multiple ways to represent information or represent content, multiple means for expression, so multiple means of you expressing yourself as the actual facilitator or learner facilitator, as well as multiple ways for the learners to facilitate themselves. And then multiple ways for engagement, multiple ways for to engage into the actual learning experience. So when you think about the whole experience, first, in order to even know which multiple ways to consider for our very diverse learner population, which is ever evolving, you have to think about that you want to think about the learners as being holistic. And so you have to actually engage and find out who the learners are. So you can think about these different ways that you will engage them using universal design for learning principles. So one way is to, one again, think about the whole learner, think about the situational factors, the holistic things about situational factors, which actually that terminology comes from deep think. Everyone has ever heard from deep think. Deep think is actually the theorists that came up with significant learning experiences, and under that umbrella, we think about situational factors. So, are these students full time learners? Are they part time learners? Are they full time employed? Do they have families? Are they adult learners? Are they non traditional learners? Those are some of the situational factors that you have to consider so that you would know which things in UDL to consider for them. And then we think about the aspect of being liberating. UDL really falls within that. And so that's having flexibility. And universal design for learning allows for flexibility. So not making every assessment written based. Everyone doesn't write well. Some students do better by expressing themselves, multiple means of expression, expressing themselves verbally. So maybe in your discussion board, I know we use a lot of these things, and that's across modalities in our learning management system. Then in your
Mhm.
discussion board, you allow for them to maybe write their response or to record the response and give it to you verbally. So those are some aspects of how universal design for learning and learner engagement and the whole experience work in tandem.
So you mentioned how the learner is ever changing and learner needs are ever changing. So how is AI fitting in with your model or your model fitting in with AI?
Sure, it's a great question. And so when you think about the component of you think about the component of the whole experience, and you think about the AI, generative AI tools, and you want to work with the learners. So you think about a tool such as Copilot, which gives information of kind of about how to engage learners and work with them together. uh, it can help you to take various aspects of the learners in a very fast, because it's using large language models and fast information. And if you plug in non-specific, because we want to also keep in mind privacy matters, but
Mhm.
non-specific, so no identifiers as far as their names and their and
Mhm.
things like that, but some maybe some characteristics, so age, the number of people in the class, and things of that nature, and plug that into any particular generative AI tool, and it can possibly give you some instructional strategies and things that you might use that can help very quickly to give you some specifics about those specific characteristics that are really identified and aligned with that group. So if you're teaching 4 different classes with very, different makeups of who's in that class, these tools can help you very quickly, almost on the spot, if you plug just some very small prompts with some key information in as to what you can do to make that experience more uh, personalized, more dynamic for
Yes.
them, so on and so forth.
Oh, I love that tip because usually, when we talk about using AI, it's you look to use it in different content areas, and so I like the tip that you gave about actually looking from the lens of who is your student and what are the student needs. So I love that tip. It's great. So what's been your feedback from faculty in employing the framework?
You know what? That is a great question. So I've had really, really, really positive feedback. I have been able to use this framework with actually a number of faculty who went through something through an experience, a faculty development experience, where the framework was actually what was used, where you're able to actually use this framework, I would say, for continuous improvement. And in this particular professional development experience, the faculty took the components of the framework and not to make it evaluative, but to have it as a lens to look at what things they were already doing that were within the confines of the component. So I would want to offer that this isn't a checklist. Like you do 3 things and it's a whole experience. It's more of a lens to frame the many things that faculty are already doing in their learning facilitation to give them somewhat of a benchmark or to help them provide evidence that they're doing these things that have been proven to assist the learners. So in that particular experience, those faculty took their current syllabi and they looked to see what was in their syllabi, and they looked to see what things they were already doing. And we mapped their syllabi to what's called a course map. So, like basically all the components and things that were happening in their class. And so they were able to look and basically identify I'm already doing these particular things. These will fall under the umbrella of welcoming. They also might have fallen under the umbrella of some of the other components. I'm doing these things already. And then they might be able to say, okay, well, I don't have as much happening in the liberating aspect, which is quite common because we have mostly been trained to have very structured and very, I'll just use the term structured, very
Mhm.
structured syllabi. That's how we've been trained as professors and as those who develop things. And so now understanding that we have this evolving learner population, that everything doesn't fall in this neat box, that might have been an area where, oh, I could think about some different areas, some different ways to make my class more liberating, more flexible. Or in cases of empowering, if you're dealing with a very different learner population and these different types of students, is all of the course content actually empowering to them? Do they see themselves in either the literature that's being used, in the images that's being used? Is it reflective of the learners who are in there? And so they could say, okay, well, I've been using the same content for a long time. Some of this stuff doesn't reflect this particular learner group, or this learner group has changed over the years. And so that was some ways. And so within that particular experience, faculty found it to where it wasn't intimidating. It wasn't something they looked at as critical. It was not overly prescriptive. That's a really big
Mhm.
one, is that it's not necessarily dictating, but it really just provided a lens and kind of allowed it to be a partner with the faculty and what they were doing to highlight what they were doing well and what they should continue and to open up some opportunities where they might want to expand.
Really a support tool is what
Yeah,
it sounds like. And it's great. A course map.
yeah.
A course map. Okay. Okay. I'm thinking of how we can integrate that tool onto our campus. So we'll talk about that some more. But I
Sure.
want to explain to our audience why they hear you saying learner and me saying student. And
Oh, wow.
we're going, we're, and So thank you so much for using learner, because that's the term that we really need to be using now. So tell our audience why.
Sure. So, from my school of thought and kind of my training, one thing that's really important in the higher education context and in any industry, we are an industry, everyone, particularly in American higher education, because our learners are paying and we are being paid. We're not volunteering. So this is an exchange. And it's also, there's an outcome. We're expecting them to be able to go out and have value and quality from their experience to contribute
Yes.
to their various professions. So in most industries, there's jargon. And the language or the jargon or the words used, they change because they actually are meaningful. And so traditionally in higher education, we have all used the term student. And I do use the term student interchangeably, but student has the context or the meaning kind of included or wrapped around it of being more of a passive recipient or being in the seat to where they are just taking in what is given out, where learner signifies that they're playing an active role in the learning experience. And so it is not just about what's being given, it also puts onus and responsibility on them for what they're gaining. So it should be a welcome term to faculty because in practice, and of course, some of these things are just terms until you put it in practice. In practice, when you are a learning facilitator, that's why I don't use the term a lot of times as just teacher
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
instructor, but when you are facilitating learning, it takes some of the stress off of you if you start to create experiences and opportunities to where the learners have to actually engage and take more part of their learning experience and not just sit and be passive recipients or just students. So, are they students in the learning context? At times. And at times, they also should definitely be learners.
Excellent. So speaking of our learners, how are your learners receiving, in this case, how are your learners responding to the framework?
So, learners sometimes are recipients and or beneficiaries of the framework without knowing the framework is at play, unless in my case, when I actually do work with future educators at times when I'm teaching, so I may actually bring up the framework so because this is their field. And so when I'm in the school of education, sometimes I raise the framework and explain to them actually what's happening. And that's also in alignment with andragogy. And andragogy is the science or art of helping adults to learn. And when you're using andragogy, one thing that's important is to really give the why, not just say this is the assignment, this is the due date, or this is the activity, but to explain that you're doing this because X, Y, and Z, because that is more according to andragogy and the principles of andragogy, that is more in alignment with how you address and facilitate learning with adults. You actually give the why to why something is happening and why it's happening that way. You allow for feedback from them to talk about that. So in the context of where learners are aware that the framework is happening, they really appreciate that it is happening. They really like that there is actually a rhyme or reason to what's happening in their learning experience, and that is just not randomized or just tradition. In the context where they don't know what's happening, I think that the feedback I've received, like for instance from evaluations, that they really appreciate certain elements. So, for instance, such elements as the open. So, open in this context, the component of open in the framework, which is the O, deals with an element of feedback. And that's not just the instructor or the learning facilitator giving feedback to the learners, which is very common. Sometimes it's a
Hmm.
one-way thing. But this is where we, as the people who are facilitating the learning experience, create a space to get, a safe and brave space for the learners to give feedback to us. Not at the end of the semester only with evaluations, but throughout the experience. Things are moving too quickly for me. Or what you covered was not as clear. Or this assignment might seem too expansive or daunting based on the materials you provided, or you haven't provided enough materials that are aligned with this. And getting that real feedback and open that up to where you can make almost real-time
Yes.
modifications or improvements to the learning experience because, and this is not necessarily to say that the learners get to vote or democratize and have and create the course by themselves, but it does allow for them to have some buy-in and some aspects of operation in the experience with the instructor or with the learning
Yes.
facilitator, which causes for them to have a more empowered, which is one of the thing empowering experience because it reflects them. They're just not again receiving what's happening, but they become more involved. And likely you're going to have people become more engaged when it's not just happening upon them, happening to them. So the experience in cases where they know it's happening or they don't know what's happening, it's very helpful. And if I could share this, you didn't ask this, but you might be getting to this. I could also say it's really good to be exposed to frameworks like this or this particular framework because when I, for instance, receive a request from a learner
Hmm.
that like an email say, I might, need more time or I have this going on. Some of my traditional ways of thinking or responses sometimes to say, the syllabus says this, or you know you want to go get your studies done, this is what it takes, this is what I have to go through. But then when I have a framework that has made me more sensitive and more understanding of again current context and current learners, I sometimes say, okay, could I be more liberating or flexible in this context? Would it really hurt me or the course to extend this particular due date, not just for this learner, but potentially for everyone, so it's equitable for everyone. So it's not like I'm making an exception, but I then, add something. Could I allow for them to take an assessment more than once as opposed to the one and done, which actually speaks to that they don't learn from trial and error, that they have to get everything right the first time. And so this framework, then again, it stands up as a mirror to your learning design and to the learning experience and to your practices to make it more of a whole experience and not just one that is very rigid. And I like to say that rigidity does not equate to rigor. And so it really, I think it's really a beneficial tool and it's been a beneficial framework for all those involved.
Wow, so much. That was such rich, rich information you gave us there. So this is really good. I heard you say real-time feedback. That's one of the first things that resonated with me because when the class is over, it's over. And so if the learner can provide real-time feedback, that does enhance the experience. I can certainly see that. So this is really rich information and it is empowering the learner as well as the faculty member to grow. So it's
Absolutely.
awesome. So I want to go back to AI because you mentioned a software that you use. I guess we call it software, learning language model, Copilot. And Copilot is in Microsoft, right?
Yes.
I
Mhm.
think Copilot's in Microsoft. So what other AI do you use in your framework?
Sure. So I do want to mention that I don't work for any of these large language models, or you said software. They are software. They are technology. So I don't work for any of these technology companies. But and I don't have my list put up in front of me right now. But
Okay.
Claude AI is one of my favorite that I use. I do want to say that most of the large language generative AI technologies, one, I want to say for our colleagues, they have a free version if they're not free. Some of them you
Hmm.
can pay for a pro version or a better version, but many of them have similar capabilities
Hmm.
of being able to create graphics, to analyze data, to edit information, to produce large language things, to produce things as syllabi. So while I mentioned Copilot and I mentioned Claude AI, and I am blanking on several right now. Yeah, of course, ChatGPT. Um, you can do some of the same functions across the large language models. So it is not like they are all relegated to one particular, like the functionality is relegated to one particular model, so you don't necessarily have to engage into 10 different AI, generative AI software or technologies in order to do them. You could just get into one if you needed to.
I agree. But I wanted to pass that information on if you had a favorite. And so you mentioned Copilot. And so that's
I
why
would
I
say
asked.
Claude AI is probably my favorite that I use a lot, and that's spelled like the name Claude, CLAUDE AI. I really like Claude AI. A lot of our institutions might have Copilot because a lot of our institutions use that software, Microsoft institutions. So that might be already embedded and have the pro version. And something you could do with that is you could literally record your class sessions if you have them via Teams, for instance, Microsoft Teams, and get a summary that you could use and give to your learners. You could take the recording and it can give you a transcript. That transcript can also then be turned into audio. So again, multiple means of a representation. Um, I don't want to raise this AI tool right now because I'm blanking on the name, but there's an AI tool that actually takes content and turns it into a podcast. So
Uh-huh.
it's all. Are you familiar with that one?
It's Notebook
I
LM,
think
I think.
I think so. Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so it's so many different things. I would say, and if we are pushing faculty to being open, just explore them, play around with them, play around with a couple of functionality that's beneficial to yourself as the instructor and beneficial to your learners. So you don't have to necessarily become an AI pro or, because I would say I don't even know if that's going to exist because it's changing and adapting so fast, but you can become an AI practitioner where you're practicing with it and seeing how it works for your particular need.
So let's, excuse me, get a little deeper into AI and your framework. Because AI is ever changing and the conversation continues to come up in academia, is AI going to take my job? And so I think your framework clearly says that that is not going to happen. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
I think as educators that I wouldn't say, and I don't want because I don't want to get anyone a false sense of security. Um,
Sure.
I think that we should always be aiming to grow and learn. So
Mhm.
what, but if you think about true context, and this may sound overly simplified, but I don't think AI will remove educators no more than calculators removes mathematicians.
Mhm.
So I wanted to give like a frame of reference. The calculator, powerful technology. It is a technology, powerful tool that is artificial intelligence. If anyone didn't know, it's not generative artificial intelligence like the large language models, but it is an artificial intelligence when you put some information in. But the way a calculator work is a partner that you work with, that the user engages with. That's whether that's the mathematician or the student. Either one has to engage. That is very similar when it comes to these large language models and generative AI. It becomes a partner. And the more we learn and engage and learn how to use them, the better we make use of that technology. So if we use that as a parallel and as a framework, so to speak, that kind of really sets us into more of a reality of to where we are right now. I cannot
Mhm.
necessarily speak to 10 years down the line or to say that there'll never be any kind of threat to the workforce. But I will say this, if you do not become more equipped and open to engaging technology, the subject matter expertise alone will not be enough to make you viable and to
Mhm.
safeguard you. And that's not, again, to scare anyone, it's to be just honest. I have written an article, and it was in the diverse issues of higher education called The Missing Piece. And the
Mhm.
piece was both peace, PIECE, and also peace, PEACE.
Okay.
Um, and it was teaching and learning in a digital age. And one thing that I posit in that article and say that there is no more the day to where we have technology and then teaching where there's a separation or it's disaggregated. All teaching and learning now is digital, and that's across modalities. If you're teaching in an in-person situation, a hybrid, a high flex, or online, it is all going to use some element of digitization. So it is a call out and a call forth to anyone in this industry, in this area, to become an engaged person in technologies. And AI is just another technology that we can leverage to use.
Absolutely. We're speaking to Dr. Morris Thomas. Dr. Thomas, tell us how we can learn more about your framework.
Sure. So there is an article called the Whole Experience Framework, and I will make sure that I share the link with Dr. McAfee. I believe it's called Leveraging the Whole Experience Framework to Promote Inclusive Learning. Um,
Okay.
that is out in a journal. There is also another article in the Higher Education Digest that talks about or uses the whole experience framework to talk about leadership and how this framework can
Excellent.
inform leadership and environments in general. So those are two ways I can think of off the top of my head of things that are actually published and open for that's widely open for everyone to access.
Okay. You are a leader in the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And so I am so happy that you took the time to spend it with us today. What is it, one thing that you would like to leave it, or if you have more than one thing that you'd like to leave us with today, what is it?
Hmm. Great question. I'm thinking like, what would I want to leave everyone with? I would say it goes back to the point I was making earlier about the push or the encouragement for folks to really engage into these various technologies. I think that, not I think, one thing that is for certain and that has happened more recently is that higher education as an industry has been scrutinized for its quality and its value. And one thing that I want to raise whenever I have the platform or voice to do so is that we don't want to wait until external forces and factors change us or guide us. But if we can be reflective practitioners and actually think about how can we continue to improve, how can we continue to make what we do better, how can we actually do so that our learners benefit, but that we also benefit as well as those who really enjoy education. And that's the reason why we came into this field, and that's why we studied for years and years, so that we really invest in ourselves to become better, to make sure that what we're doing stays viable, stays needed, stays valued, and has the quality that is needed. So that's what I would leave.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so proud and happy to know you and to call you my HBCU faculty fellow and colleague. All right,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Thomas.
Thank
We'll
you so
talk
much.
again soon.
Yes, talk to
Absolutely.
you soon.
All right.